Hey, it's Melissa from the Murder Unscripted podcast, dropping in before the show to give you a quick trigger warning. Today's episode contains discussions of abuse, including physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Please listen with care, and if you need support, we'll be sharing resources at the end of the episode and listing them in our show notes.
You know what's interesting to me? I'm finding more joy in this podcast ever since I started working in true crime again. Does that make sense?
I think it's just because you're spending quality time with me. But no, I do get that.
Well, no, but that's important too. That means a lot. But also, I'm getting to do stories that I want to do, not stories that
Yeah.
are assigned to me. Like the one I just got, it's not great from a
Yeah.
whodunit standpoint, but I mean, it's got to be shot, so we're just going to tell it in the most creative way possible. But I've been like pulling my hair out all day. It's like, man, I just want to get to something I can tell however I want. You don't have to think about those things.
Well, that's like our case today. I couldn't handle it. It was too much. Like, I couldn't write it. So I totally get that.
Yeah, but it's just nice to do your own thing at whatever
Mm-hmm.
pace and whatever direction you want to go. Just saying.
33, 1, 0. Main event of the evening. Thursday and half past the hour.
It's Tuesday, and you're listening to Murder Unscripted.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another installment of Murder Unscripted, the most immersive podcast on the internet. And it's true because I checked. Couldn't find any others. I'm your host, Ed Hydock, along with my co-host, the Hot Mess Express, Melissa Spivey.
All right. First of all, I have no argument for that because it's a valid statement. But moving on. Hi, everybody.
I have a text that you call yourself the Hot Mess Express, so
And you probably saved that.
sure did. Always keep
course.
receipts. So for anybody who's been following along this month, we have chosen February, the month of love, to highlight cases where people thought they found Mr. or Mrs. Wonderful, only to find themselves in horrific and sometimes deadly situations in a block we're calling Fairy Tale or Romance Fail. And last week, Melissa told us the story of poor Anna Repkina, who moved all the way from Russia to be with William Hardgrove, this Oregon man who turned out to be already engaged to somebody else, and it cost Anna her life.
I still don't get how that freaking bridge troll landed such like a beautifully amazing woman like Anna. I will never understand that.
Pheromones, maybe. I heard if you wear your t-shirt running in the morning and then like leave it sit on a chair and then put it back on at night and go clubbing, that
Nobody wants
attracted.
your stinky BO t-shirt at the club. Nobody wants you at the club. But
I don't want to be at the club. Is it after 7 p.m.? I'm not going anywhere.
you're like the bridge club? Well, maybe. Mahjong club? Got
Oh
it.
man. Well, today in our Love Gone Wrong themed block, we are going to tell you about a woman that this world is honestly better because she's in it. And like all of us, she is complex with so many layers, but brave, determined, and faithful are just a few of the words that I would use to describe my friend, Laura Cowan. And I met Laura while I was working as a researcher on the ID show House of Horrors. And in this instance, I never actually got to interview Laura on camera. We just talked over the phone. But I really did have to immerse myself in her story in order to write the pitch and kind of help put the show together. And we talked so many times and developed a friendship over the years. And what an absolutely incredible woman she is. The things she endured, my God. But she came out of the other side stronger and is now a humongous advocate on the anti-domestic violence circuit. And she even has a radio show, which I was a guest on, just talking about true crime and my experience.
I did not know that. I'm going to have to look it up.
Yeah.
I don't generally know the details of Ed's cases, but I watched the recently released movie about Laura's life. And honestly, I couldn't sit through it all. I couldn't make it through the entire thing. It was too much for me. And at this point, I'm stalling for time because I don't want to talk about it. But I guess we should get into it.
I don't know how else to tell these stories without telling you what really happened. And it's important because these were human beings that did these things to other human beings, which we're going to get into in a second. But before we get started, I want to give a humongous shout out to one of our new research producers, Sue Van Valkenburg Grice, because without Sue, I was in Washington the past however many days. Without Sue, I could not have gotten this thing written in time. So she's a rock star for this.
She did amazing.
Okay, so in order to tell this story, we need to fire up that. Man, do we still have the keys to the time machine? I think having
I lose my keys all the time, so probably not.
Well, find them because we need to go all the way back to April of 1999. Melissa, do you remember what you were doing back then?
In April of 1999, I would have been in the 5th grade. So I was probably sitting on my blow up plastic furniture and listening to Spice Girls.
Oh, nothing has changed.
Nope, not a thing. All right, now that we're back in April of 1999, the end of my favorite decade, Furby had taken over the world, and I'm still scared of the one that I had. It was so terrifying. I don't know why I had to have it, but I did.
They were some of the scariest toys ever made.
They were so creepy.
We had
Well,
boglins when I was a kid.
I don't know what
Look
that
up a
is.
boglin, and all of a sudden Furby
Boglin?
looks like a unicorn.
I feel like Teddy Ruxpin was a little creepy because he talked too.
You don't even
Remember
know.
him?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Google it. But luckily, we had the absolute pleasure of enjoying the vocals of these angels here on Earth. Like Cher had the #1 spot with "Believe." Epic.
I do a mean Cher impression that you're not going to get to hear on here. I'll show you later,
Oh
though.
man, I'll take a behind the scenes and stick it on the
Okay.
TikTok. Pay attention,
All right.
guys. Heartbreak Hotel was released by the Queen herself, Whitney Houston, and TLC was killing it with No Scrubs. Looking at you, Will Hargrove, you're a damn
Yeah.
scrub.
Didn't that just come up last week?
It did. But that was such a vibe when it came to music. But that wasn't the only vibe. The world was obsessed with the red pill or blue pill option introduced to moviegoers in The Matrix, which was the top spot that year. Do you know, Ed, which pill you would take?
Oh, that's a loaded question. But yeah, I'd probably the red, definitely. Don't don't bring me back to reality. Just keep me living in a dream world.
I've never seen The Matrix, but I would pick
Oh.
whatever pill Keanu Reeves would give me.
Yeah, you would get whatever one people told you to eat. That's what you would
Oh,
do.
yeah, I'd be like, okay. There was a pink one. I'd totally take that one.
Well, let's get into this. So we are in the beginning of April 1999, and Laura Cowan walks into the local post office in the rural town of Aguanga, California. And this is a Southern California town that's surrounded by multiple Indian reservations. And as of the 2010 census, only had a population of little over 1,000 people. This is a very small town, very remote. Laura is accompanied by her spiritual husband.
Ugh.
She's at the post office to pick up a package containing food stamps, which only she can sign for. And by the greatest strokes of luck, there's another person in the post office who starts up a conversation with her companion, like distracting him. And Laura then locks eyes with the postal worker behind the counter. And she lifts up her dress, and in her underwear is a tightly folded pack of paper. And she slips it to the worker. And worker gives it a quick glance, and with a nod of her head, she goes, like with her eyes, she's like, I got you.
Could you imagine if she had gone to like a male postal worker? I don't know what would have happened. Like, I don't know that he would have gotten that.
I don't know. But you are going to find out what Laura was trying to get the postal worker's attention for. And it's heroic what she did.
Mhm.
So, walking out of that post office, Laura could only pray that her 13 double sided pages of notes that she passed along was going to get in the right hands and save her life. Her 3 children, 2 additional women, and 16 other children were being held captive in what can only be described as a house of horrors.
That is such an understatement.
This is all going to make sense at the end. So we're going to tell a couple different stories and they're all going to come together. But it's important to understand all the characters that are in play here. So
Mhm.
Richard Body Jr. was born near Norfolk, Virginia in the mid 1950s and is said to have a relatively normal childhood. In 1973, as a young man, he married 18-year-old Marva Barfield, who had also grown up in a small town near Newark, Norfolk as well. And there are some contradictory stories about what life with Richard was like when they lived in Virginia, but Marva did end up testifying that as early as 3 months into their marriage, he was abusive and that she was scared of what he was capable of. And based on what we learned later, I think Marva was trying to do her best. I mean, you're going to hear these tales that go on kind of right under Marva's nose, and you're going to be like, how? But I think Marva was trying to basically keep this man's temper in check and kind of like, is it for the sake of her kids, you know?
For sure.
So between 1973 and 1985, Richard and Marva had 12 children. 12. Can you imagine 12 kids? I have
No.
4, 2 of my own, 2 step, and it's like, there's some weekends. But with all those kids, Richard packed everybody up and said goodbye to the East Coast. And in 1985, the family made their way to the West Coast.
How many cars did they need to get 14 people and like all your shit across the country? Now, I know if it was you and
Right?
your fam, your ass would have been sitting in the trunk.
For real. My ass is in the trunk now, and we have a family of 6. So add on 8 more kids, and who knows? Who knows where I'd be? I'd be on a roof
I
rack.
told you to get one of those turtle top things and stick you inside. You're fine.
Wow, on the roof like a dead deer. Well, no matter how the family got there, they made their first home in Bakersfield, California. And just for a little context, Bakersfield is in SoCal, and if you draw a line between Fresno and LA, it's a little south of the midpoint. So that's kind of where we're looking. So over the next 3 years, Marva gave birth to 2 more children of Richard's. And meanwhile, he found his calling with the Nation of Islam when he changed his name to Mansa Musa Muhammad. And moving forward, Richard Body is now going to be Musa because that's how everybody knows him. I just wanted to give you a little backstory.
All right. I have so many questions, so let's pause. First of all, what in the absolute hell snapped in his brain to make him such a monster? Like, we need to know. Something had to have happened. You don't just become that terrible. But at this point in the story, we're up to 14 kids, right?
We are. And I think that would be a good question for Laura because I don't know if anyone that we can be in contact with would have known him better.
Yeah. Well, I know that, with the kids, and I hate to say this, and I'm not saying that Marva didn't love all of her children, but like, how many of those children were non-consensual at the hands of Musa the Monster, as I will be referring to him as? Like, I feel like maybe a few of them. But moving on. Okay, I am admittedly ignorant about the Nation of Islam, but is that still like a branch of Islam, right?
Kind of. I don't want to speak out of turn. That's a kind of a touchy area that I don't know if I feel comfortable talking about. But what I do know is they started in Detroit back in the 30s. And listeners, please let us know if I'm incorrect. Like this is all just stuff that I'm finding online. So it gained a lot of popularity because the principles were really to help African Americans build a better life through economic freedom, free from drugs and alcohol and violence. And it just really focused on running businesses and producing goods and being self sustaining.
That sounds like a great thing.
I know you would think, and I mean, by all accounts, it was, except for the people that used it the wrong way. By the late 1960s, the Nation of Islam had some shifting and wanted to be looked at as its own kind of religion, as opposed to being connected to what I guess would be called mainstream Islam. And it definitely had some problems along the way, and I don't know a ton about it, and it's not really central to our story. So maybe with the exception of how Musa kind of internalized his teachings to justify himself and what he was doing to this family.
All right, again, I don't know much about this, but do you think he was just trying to justify the fact that he was evil? Like he's just trying to blame it on something?
I think he was evil, and the Nation of Islam became his vessel to
Okay.
you know what I'm saying, to like
Mm-hmm.
use that evil willy nilly and then blame it
Right.
on something other than himself. So Now that I gave you a little background about Musa, remember when I started this story in the post office that Laura was accompanied by her spiritual husband.
Ugh.
In case you couldn't figure it out, that spiritual husband is Musa Muhammad. So the big question is, who is Laura Cowan and how did she end up with Musa? So Laura Carmela Cowan is a proud daughter of Cleveland. She graduated high school in 1975 and never really thought much about leaving Cleveland while she was growing up. That is until she watched the Rose Bowl parade. And then that California dreaming weather was calling her name. She was tired of the gray and bleak and cold Cleveland.
Ugh. Same, girl. Same. It's gray and bleak here in Pennsylvania as well. So I feel that.
And then they throw in the occasional just rain to make it mushy too, just gross and muddy outside.
Fun.
hmm
We're having a good time here.
Yeah, seriously. Well, as a young woman with a new desire for adventure in mind, Laura packed up her car and headed for the West Coast. And it was the early 80s, and Laura had not a whole lot of money, but a U-Haul full of stuff and no job lined up. So this was a serious risk that Laura was taking. And she found
Wow.
herself in Monrovia, California, which I'd like to ask her why Monrovia, how she ended up there. I know she did. I don't know why. But it's east of Pasadena, and she got a job working for an insurance agency. So she must have had some skills when she went out there.
I give her so much credit for doing that, just being like, I want to be there and I'm going to make it happen no matter what. I don't care that I don't have a whole lot of money or a place or like I'm doing it.
She was a dreamer and made
Mhm.
good. I mean, her dream kind of turns into a nightmare, as you're going to see. But I mean, kudos to her for trying.
Yeah.
So, leaving work one day in 1991, Laura's path would be forever altered when she met Muhammad Shabazz, also a brother of the Nation of Islam, and he was preaching on the street when she met him. So, Laura and Shabazz hit it off immediately, and love was in the air. And in June of 1991, they married and ended up having 2 children together, a son Ahmed and a daughter named Miriam. And this couple was with a young family was just perfect. They were enjoying life together. Everything was great.
In the movie, it was definitely set up like a meet cute. Like when they
Oh,
first met on the street. Yeah, it was a sweet scene and like the next
yeah.
couple ones were really sweet.
That's good because I think they really did have a good relationship. I mean, you're going to see some things pop up, but it's not related to Musa Muhammad.
Right.
So even though Shabazz didn't have a college degree, he was a smooth talker and he was able to provide for his young family. And he also went along with the principles preached by the Nation of Islam, which again focused on being self sufficient, self sustaining, and he ran a business. Shabazz was able to convince a little old woman to let him take control of a bookstore in San Bernardino and essentially making him the owner. And then years later, Shabazz did the same thing with a struggling Mexican restaurant. So Laura is having this really beautiful life at this point. She's with her husband. They're working together to run these 2 small businesses, and they have a nice home together with children until 1995.
Mm.
So on May 5th of that year, Laura had just returned from LA where she was purchasing some pies to sell at the restaurant. And when she got back, it was surrounded, the restaurant that is, by unmarked police cars and ATF agents. And she's like, what is going on here? And she sees her loving husband Shabazz being led away in a handcuff because he was selling troves of illegal firearms behind her back.
Wow.
Following his arrest, Shabazz essentially left Laura with 2 businesses and 2 children. So for now, she decides to stand by her man until he serves his time, which was a 5-year federal sentence.
I can hear Tammy Wynette singing Stand By Your Man.
Oh, can you sing it? It's a good song.
Absolutely not.
If you sing that, I'll do my Cher impression.
I don't want to hear your Cher impression.
Needless to say, this incident completely upended Laura's life. So now you have a single mom to a 3-year-old and an infant with zero knowledge about how to run a business. And Laura was struggling. The bills were piling up. And unfortunately, the restaurant took a big PR hit when Shabazz was arrested. So obviously, the business dried up very quickly, and there wasn't a whole lot she could do to save it. So Laura had to close the restaurant while she desperately tried to hold on to the bookstore as long as she could, at least until her husband got back and could help. But with
Mhm.
Shabazz sentenced to 5 years in prison, I mean, that's a long time, and Laura was running out of options. So, like many people who are actively involved in their religious community, Laura turned to her mosque to see if she could find any help. And it suggested to her that she connect with Mansa Musa Muhammad, a brother of the mosque, who was actually an acquaintance of Shabazz's through the Nation of Islam. So obviously Laura gets a bunch of good vibes. She's like, "Well, I love my husband. His friends are my friends." So she kind of trusts this guy. Laura has said that Musa was charming and charismatic when she met him, and I feel like we hear this a lot with some of the worst people. It's like this
Hmm.
public mask that they wear to keep people from ever questioning kind of what's going on in their head or their actions or what's going on behind closed doors. I mean, Christ, look at Bundy and Gacy the past 2 weeks and the people who have analyzed him and said this is what they were doing. They were hiding all day, every day.
I literally was just thinking, look at Bundy and Gacy. Like, that's exactly
Right?
what they did. And you know
Yep.
what? Musa is just as terrible as they are.
I feel like most of them are though. I feel like William
Yeah.
Hardgrove, no one would ever say like each of his girlfriends, neither would have suspected that he'd be capable of what he was capable of. So I
Right.
feel like
No, you're right.
all so in spite of Moose's help with trying to keep the bookstore running, the bills were too much for Laura to get on top of them. She had to close the bookstore, and now you think she was out of options before? So Musa had been kind and friendly to Laura this whole time that he was trying to help her. So for Laura, when Musa offered to let her and the children live with him and his family, this combination of who she thought Musa was and her husband seemingly approving, it seemed like the best option for her.
Oh, I don't like this.
Well, this is where things start to take a turn. So here we are in 1995, and Musa and Marva have been living in California for about 10 years now, and they have 14 children. And it seems like their 10 years in California was a bit chaotic, particularly when it came to housing, at the 16 of them. So, court records and various news reports have them living in motels and various apartments and rentals prior to offering Laura a place to live due to his own financial struggle. So, Musa wasn't exactly rolling in it either, and he had 14 kids.
Jeez.
And Musa took Laura at one point and her kids to meet Marva and the rest of his family when they were living in a motel. So, she kind of knew the situation before she was getting in there.
All right, so this dipshit is bad with money, and his wife and 14 children are living in like motels and God knows where else, and he's offering to help with Laura's business. I feel like he was trying to like get the business from Laura and Shabazz, but of course he failed at it because he's a failure.
That's a hot take. I'd be interested to hear about that. But I definitely think that everything Musa did was an absolute con job, and no doubt his help was anything other than that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's Musa the fucking monster.
Yeah, there's no other way to describe him.
Mm-mm.
So when Musa takes Laura to meet his family at the motel where they're staying, her first impression though is nothing short of weird. So all of the children, you got to picture this. All 14 of these kids are sitting on the floor lined up and they're all facing the wall. And I don't know what my reaction would be to that situation, but I can't even like comprehend how off-putting that would be. I mean, it must look like you're
Mm-mm.
walking into some ritual.
Yeah.
So at this point, Musa is still being relatively kind of polite and kind to Lara and her children, and he's treating them more like guests that should just kind of accept how his house runs, but they're still guests. So, and it's important to know that they're kind of still doing their own thing in those early stages. So Musa and his family did their thing. Lara and her children lived there, but they stayed separately. They shopped separately. They cooked separately. They just did their own thing. And Laura can see, though, that Musa has some serious anger issues with his own family. And deep down, though, she believed in her heart that it was just temporary, or maybe she's didn't have to worry about it because she was just trying to make the best of it for the short time that she was hoping to be there until she could get back on her feet. So she just dealt with it.
Well, yeah, and what else is she gonna do? She's a single mom with two children to take care of, with not a whole lot of options. You're gonna do whatever you think is best.
It's absolutely true. So, and remember, Musa was a brother of the Nation of Islam, and it appears he took advantage of this newfound faith as a cover for what he was inflicting upon his poor family. So
Mm-hmm.
prior to Laura moving in, Musa was using all sorts of violence and frankly mental and physical torture to quote unquote raise his children. This was his way of teaching them the way. So Musa had pulled all of his children out of school under the guise of homeschooling them, but some of them, like the youngest, never even went. He just pulled them out so he could kind of teach him the Musa way. And these kids were totally isolated from the outside world and spent their time praying. basically, to fill their bodies with nourishment. That was food for them, was prayer.
Is California one of those states that has like no rules about homeschooling? Because why was that not followed up on?
Why would I know that?
I don't know. I'm just saying in general. Like I'm gonna have to look it up to see because like why was that not checked into? Like, are you actually schooling these children?
That's a good point. I don't know the answer to that because I'm not a school superintendent in California. Anyway, so this is where things get rough, and we want to warn you guys. So there's some sensitive topics coming up, including horrific child abuse, physical abuse, and sexual abuse. And I'm going to try to go through it lightly without too much detail, but feel free to skip ahead a couple minutes if you don't want to hear these details. So I don't know where this monster learned how to condition his wife and children, but it does appear that he implemented punishments slowly at first. For example, he started instructing Marva to withhold food from the children as punishment. That was like his first go-to. And at
That's
first it
sick.
was you would skip a meal and pray instead because we talked about prayer being nourishment. But then it became a whole day without food and he'd work up to at times not feeding the children for up to a week. And Musa had chains and locks on everything in the house. He would lock the cabinets and the refrigerator so that the kids wouldn't steal food. If one of the kids got caught, and this is disgusting, he literally made them eat their own vomit and feces of the stolen food. So he would wait until they digest it
Stop.
and get rid of it and then make them eat it.
I fucking hate this. I hate this so much. When I was watching the movie, I was about at this part that I turned it off. I was like, okay, I've gotten enough. I can't do it.
Well, I've made no bones about my feelings on trigger warnings, especially in a show about
Mhm.
murder. But consider this your trigger warning, and I'm telling you this not to shock you or introduce some kind of gore factor, but because this is what Mansa Musa Muhammad did to his family, and it is documented in court transcripts, and the world cannot forget about who this guy was. I'm just going to bullet point, kind of list some of Musa's other tactics that he would use: beating children with a boat oar, making them lay on their bellies with their legs in the air, kind of like Superman,
Mhm.
and then beating the bottoms of their feet. He'd lock them in various rooms, such as bathrooms or the laundry room, for days at a time. He had some sort of hanging device that he would lock their feet into and basically hang them upside down and then just beat them.
That's sick. That's like Jerry Brudos, the shoe guy. He did that
Yes.
shit.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's on that level. And I don't know
yeah.
what he would have done if he would have actually killed somebody. I don't want to spoil the ending, but if he would have actually killed somebody, I don't know if he would have felt bad about it. If like what do you think's going to happen? He would make the boys fight each other. Sometimes he would make them stand facing a wall on their feet, sometimes kneeling all night long. He rarely let the children bathe or brush their teeth. And for some twisted reason, he wouldn't let them use the toilet and instead would make them use these buckets and bags to collect their urine and feces. He beat the children with belt buckles. He broke one of his son's arms and he pulled hair so hard that a few of the children had permanent bald spots when they were found. And there is significantly more that I can add, but I'm going to stop because I'm getting angry reading a list of bulleted things that he did. So I can only imagine hearing this for the first time how you almost feel.
I cannot imagine being a juror on this.
It would be the second you hear any of this, guilty.
Oh, I would have thrown myself on the floor pretending to have a seizure so I could get out of it. Like, I couldn't do this.
It gets worse because two of Moose's daughters, the oldest ones, had said that he sexually assaulted them when they turned 13, and it never stopped. And he was not charged for these accusations, probably because there was no physical evidence to use. But with everything else that happened, I personally believe them.
Oh, 100% I believe them.
So all of this, keep in mind, was going on before Laura even entered the home. And in true Musa style, he would only let her see what he wanted her to see and slowly revealed his true intentions with her as time went on. So imagine being in this situation. You go to some guy for help, you trust him to take care of you and your family, or at least give you a safe place. And this is the stuff that's going on behind that closed door. Wow. So remember when Laura first moved in with the family, Musa gave her kind of a little leeway and some freedoms. But
Mhm.
at this point, she wasn't his property. But Laura did notice a lot of his controlling behaviors to start shifting toward her. Things like all of the windows and the curtains were kind of drawn tight. The children were never allowed outside anymore. And Laura and Marva had to be together with him at all times when they went to the store. And I think he was starting to like worry that they were going to say something. Musa increased his dominance if she questioned anything, such as the locks on the food cabinets. She couldn't say a word about them, or she was in trouble. And his control was signaled to her when he scolded Laura for speaking to a neighbor and by listening on another phone. Like if she had to make a phone call, Musa was on the other end just to make sure she was doing everything the way he wanted to and not being shady
Wow.
about it. So Laura tells Musa she would like to see and speak with her husband, Shabazz. And his reaction is that he will take a message to Shabazz. I don't want you to see him, but I'll take it to him because as an Islamic woman, you shouldn't be seen alone at prison. So what he would do is he would say he was going to Shabazz, but he would never actually do it. And then he would come back to Laura and like give her a message from Shabazz. And the message was, quote, Shabazz wants you to stay with me and for me to take care of you while he's locked up and to be her wali, which in the faith means protector. So
Oh,
he's
oh.
so he's feeding Laura this line that Shabazz wants me to just put your faith in me. I will take care of you while he's locked up. So make it clear, Laura is still thinking all of this is temporary because anybody would be like, "Why are you putting up with this?" But realize she had nowhere to go, and she did think that this would kind of get better once she could get back on her feet. So the real trouble came when she tried to get a job, but Musa refused. When he asked her to become his spiritual wife, it was clear it wasn't really an ask; it was just a demand because he's like, people would look down on you as a lewd woman if they knew you were living with me and my wife. So he's again just playing these little mind games.
But they would be totally cool with you beating and raping your children? Mm.
I know. Well, once this relationship became official in his mind, Laura was no longer her own person. She was now Moose's property. She was no longer safe from his torment, and Laura and the children were subjected to the same torment as everybody else in that house. And there's a lot more physical and mental abuse, like a lot, that's going on at the
Mhm.
hands of Musa. But honestly, it's so heavy and overwhelming that there's really no point. Like, you get it, right? He's a bad dude. Things were bad, and let's move on.
Mhm.
So I would like to point out a couple things at this point, though. Musa knows Lara has a husband, Shabazz, and he was in prison, but he did not get a very long sentence, only 5 years. And Moose's idea of providing for now 20 people in his house is by collecting Social Security for himself, all the children, all the wives. Basically, everybody's Social Security check was going to him, along
Mhm.
with receiving government support. This man had 4 grand a month coming in. And just to compare that to 2024, $7,865 a month.
Oh
Dude.
my god, the system's a joke!
Well, he was more than happy to let the taxpayers fund this house of horrors, all while puffing his chest and boasting about being a man. I'm a man.
Oh, he is such a tiny little man in so many ways.
That's a fact. Well, and from here moving forward, the timeline of events is a little murky because with everybody beaten and starved on a regular basis, I can only imagine that one day kind of rolled into the next. So a lot of this is getting lumped together. But I believe it was around 1997 that Laura did become pregnant by Musa during an unwanted sexual encounter. And Laura thought that she might have a chance to tell the nurse in the hospital what was going on. But as always, Musa never let her out of her sight, never left the room when she was in the hospital. So once they got back home with the new baby, Musa cruelly took that infant and away from Laura and basically gave it to Marva to raise. It's ridiculous.
I think it's wild that she never got to be alone with the nurse. I guess that the laws that are in place now, because anytime like I go to a doctor's appointment, you have to go in like by yourself and they have to be like,
Yes.
do you feel safe at home? Do and ask
Well,
all these questions.
this was during childbirth. So is that the case? I've never given birth. So,
I would imagine that they would still
hmm.
get her alone in a room at some point, regardless of what they had to say.
Well, this monster had again moved the family and now to a bigger house in an even more remote town of Anguanga. That's the one I brought up in the beginning. And he told
Mhm.
all of the wives that they would have their own rooms, which sounded like a huge upgrade, right?
I don't believe
Wrong.
him.
He had the audacity to, I'm going to use the word convert lightly, the 3-car garage into a 1-car garage and 2 sectioned off, we'll call them stalls, I guess. And this is where he decided that Laura and her kids should be locked into. And this is a garage. Make no mistake, a garage with no heat. It's like going in your garage. And no AC, no bathrooms, no running water, nothing but a thin mattress. And then he had the brilliant idea to not just lock them in there, but straight up nail any door and window shut so that when he put them in there, they would stay in there.
I hate that so much because I'm terrified of fire. And I always, every time we have this happen in a case, I always say, what if there's a fire?
So now I'm going to tell you the incredible part of the story. And this is what skyrockets Laura to superwoman status. So, in spite of everything that she and her babies were going through, basically watching them deteriorate physically and emotionally, enduring brutal beatings and forced to have sex with Musa, she found a source of strength not to give up. Being in the garage with boxes of random stuff, she was able to dig around and eventually find a legal pad and a pen. And this is when Laura started to document everything. Remember those 13 pages that she slipped to the postal worker? Well, this is how she was able to write them. So Laura kept these papers on her body at all times because she was afraid Musa was going to find them. Until that one day in April 1999, when she took the chance to save her life and slip them into the hands of the true angel on earth, the U.S. Post Office.
Wow. She is a legitimate angel.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, Melissa, the roller coaster ride of 1995 through April 1999 is finally about to pull back to the platform.
Finally.
And at 4 a.m. on April 6, 1999, Laura hears the sound of a car rolling up the driveway. And remember, this house is remote. So obviously, any kind of visitor or car or voice outside is going to draw her attention. So, but she also assumes maybe it's somebody that's lost or just turning around because nobody ever comes to the house. So, from this garage, Laura hears footsteps coming up to the house. And then all of a sudden, on the front door. And Musa obviously is big mad because it's 4 o'clock in the morning and someone's banging on his door. So his plan is to get up and basically get rid of whoever's there. And imagine this man opening the door to find police standing on the front porch and saying, "We need to speak to you about Laura."
Oh my God. That's going to be so bad.
Can you imagine what this guy's capable of? What he would be capable of doing to all of them? And it, like, to me, it had all the makings of like a mass murder suicide. Like he would be like, one moment, close the door, and then you just hear pop after pop, and everybody's dead. So obviously, police, we know what's going on inside the house, but police don't. They don't know what they're walking into. All they know is that they've been given those 13 pages of double-sided notes that Laura wrote, kind of saying we need to talk to her, and here's what's going on. So Musa closes the door and he's pissed at this point. So he goes into the garage where he had to basically undo all of the chains, all of the locks, all of the hammered nails that he put in to keep the windows and doors shut. So imagine how feverish this guy must have been trying to do all this with police right on the doorstep. Meanwhile, Laura is pretending to be kind of mid-sleep and she's woken up by Musa and he's telling her, "Laura, the cops want to speak to you. Do it quickly and get rid of them." So he's Laura's shadow as she walks to the front door and standing like uncomfortably close to her as she's talking to police, probably just so he can hear what's going on. And Laura quietly greets police, confirming yes, she was in fact Laura. And in the same way Laura used her eyes to communicate to that postal worker a few days earlier, she sent the pleading looks to the officer with her eyes like, "Get me away from this place."
God, thank God that the police understood.
Yeah. And Musa obviously had the gift of gab. He was a smooth talker. He'd made a living talking his way out of these situations, but police weren't buying his bullshit. And they were able to get him in handcuffs in the back of a police car and away from Laura. And the officers then showed Laura a faxed copy of her letter and basically said, "Is this you that wrote this?" And once she confirmed yes, that it was indeed real, she begins telling them everything.
Wow.
And then everything she says is confirmed when police enter the home, and they are shocked by the state of the house. Bags of human waste, and of course, the physical condition of all the children and all the people in that house that were held captive by Musa.
I cannot even begin to fathom what this must be like. Can you imagine walking into such a horrific scene? I mean, just what you're seeing, the smells, just like, I just feel like there's so much bad, like, vibes. Just the whole house is like evil. And I don't know, how can you keep not only your composure, but like, how do you keep sane after seeing that?
I imagine it's like a barnyard smell. If I just had to picture what that place would have smelled like, I mean, it's living things that have been left to their own devices. Even horses have their stalls cleaned out. You know,
Oh my
it's you're
God.
treated like less than an animal. And I've been in true crime, entering my 22nd year, by the way. So I've seen some shit. But
Ugh.
the things they walked into, I mean, no one was dead, thank God. But I can imagine it would be really tough. So, for time's sake, I'm not going to get into what the doctor found when he examined all of Moose's children in 1999. Just know that some of them were so malnourished that Laura was shocked to learn they were adults. Take Moose's son, Marlon, for example. He was 78 pounds. And given his height and weight, Laura assumed, I mean, he was on pace with an 11 or 12-year-old. He was 20 and he had chipped teeth. He had scars all over his body. And that was just Marlon. I mean, that's just one of those kids. So imagine it times 13.
There are no words, and there is absolutely no amount of torture that could be inflicted enough to like punish Moose the monster.
I'm a dad. So there is not a day in this world that I would let my kids go hungry while I sat there eating like a king, like this guy did. And that does not make you a man. What he did to these people makes my skin crawl. And what he did to
Mhm.
Laura, it's just astounding.
He's almost not human. He's certainly not a man. I mean, he's truly, I keep using the word monster, but that is just such a good way to put it.
It is, and what makes him a monster is the fact that he's laying on this Wally, I'm gonna be your protector, I'm gonna be your this. So
Mhm.
he's trying to justify it, and that's the worst part. So he knows he's sick, he knows he's messed up, and he's trying to say it's okay. Trust me.
Jesus.
So thankfully, Musa was quickly arrested, and Laura and her children were removed from that prison of a home, and they're able to find solace in a domestic violence shelter. And Laura's able to connect with her actual husband, Shabazz. And this is heartbreaking because I kind of led on earlier, but from the time Musa came into Laura's life, he never once contacted Shabazz, even though Laura was like, please reach out to him, tell him this, get him a message. Never once did it. And for the last 4 years, Shabazz had no idea of what was happening to his wife, to Laura or the children. And unfortunately, being in prison, he really had no way to track them down. So he was in the dark about all this. And imagine learning that after 4 years. I mean, yes, he probably felt awful for what he did, leaving Laura to begin with that
Mhm.
mess. But then to learn what that arrest, if he's never arrested, none of this happens, which is
Oh
sad.
my God.
The family does have the opportunity to reunite when Shabazz's prison sentence is over. And he had to spend some time at a halfway house, but Laura was seeing him, and the children regularly made plans to restart their lives. But very sadly, about 6 months later, Shabazz had a heart attack and he did not survive.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? Like, you finally get free from this actual hell. You're reunited with the father of your children, the man you love,
Mhm.
whatever. And
Mhm.
that just gets cut short. Like, I get that Shabazz broke the law, and I'm not saying that's okay, but like that one thing literally, it wasn't just his sentence in prison. He sentenced his family to prison. He didn't, but like, you know what I mean. Like,
But this is a great example, and I try to preach this to my kids, like, actions have consequences, and even
yes.
if they're ones that you don't intend.
I wonder if that guilt had something to do with the heart attack.
Would not
Because his heart
surprise me.
had to have been broken. Like,
I did, you know, that I did a totally off topic. I don't mean to get too far away from Laura's story, but the last case that I was just in Washington filming, it involved a dead man. And when the boy's 8-year-old son found out his dad was dead, he told his mom, he's like, my heart hurts. Like, to the point where he had to go to the doctor. And they basically said, no, buddy, this is heartache. This is what but it was a physical pain in his chest that this 8-year-old had no way to describe it. He's like, "That's what it feels like. My heart hurts." And the doctor was like,
Oh.
"It's broken heart syndrome is a real thing."
It is. Like, look at all those elderly couples where, like, one dies after, like, 50 years together, and then the other one
Yeah.
dies a couple days later.
Yeah, it's true. And no one deserves any of what happened to them, or even worse, they really didn't deserve the additional torture that Musa managed to impose on them for literally the next decade. And remember, Musa was arrested April 6, 1999. So, with all this evidence in front of the responding officers, the state of the children's health, and the 26 pages that Laura had written, oh, let's not forget the recordings of the beatings that Laura was able to make when she found a tape recorder in the garage.
Wow.
You would think this is an open and shut case, right?
You would hope. What happened?
Took 9.5 years for his trial to start in April of 2008. Can you believe that, like, quick and speedy trial?
That's asinine. Like, that's just,
Yeah.
like, another failure of the system.
Mhm. Well, and Musa denied, and to this day continues to deny all of the charges against him every step of the way.
Of
He played
course.
all the games of the legal system to delay the start of this trial, filed numerous motions, dismissed counsel, wanted to represent himself, a la
Ugh.
Ted Bundy, without the law degree. So he would find these little loopholes and just keep playing the legal game, dragging this out as long as he possibly could. The courts thankfully had enough of this BS and basically demanded his trial start after 9 years.
God, I wish they would have let him defend himself. His dumb
Oh,
ass would have fucked it up so bad.
it would have been a beatdown of the century.
I hope he gets beat down every day, but go
I know.
on.
Well, the trial documents in this case are really staggering. There's so many motions on what could be included as evidence and testimony under all the kind of California evidence codes. There's a million of them. But
Mm-hmm.
when you think about it, especially the children, they're telling their whole life story to the court and jury, especially with 9 years to prepare. I mean, I can't even imagine how hard it would be to organize all of those awful thoughts and all of memories, into 20 different little testimonies about how horrific things are. I'm sure the jury was exhausted just hearing from, kind of like when we covered all the victims of the serial killer. It's like this parade of just
Just
bad things
so
that have happened.
much. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so much.
It's enough to convince the jury, and eventually Mansa Musa Mohammed was convicted and sentenced to 7 life terms.
I mean, I'm glad he'll never get out, but like this trash pile deserves an eye for an eye justice. Like, we should beat him with an oar, starve him, hang him upside down. Then we should skip the rinse and just go straight to repeat.
That would be just, I think, in this case.
And for people who disagree with the death sentence, how? Like, let's get all the pictures of everything, and then you sit there and you tell me how it's not okay.
The only time I let it slide is when it's a victim's family, because it's like they've lived it. I haven't lived it. I just tell stories.
Mm-hmm.
But they've lived it, and if they choose to forgive, then just because it's not what I would do, I support what helps them, you know?
Yeah, whatever the victims fit. I agree. And you know what? Maybe Laura and everyone else didn't want, like, I don't know, but I just feel like he deserves. So I just hope that every day is horrible.
I imagine it is. I mean, but not
Good.
with this guy. I feel like he's so cocky that he spins it every day like, "I'm still innocent. I don't know why," like Mr. Victim, you know? Well, Laura has become such an advocate against domestic violence, and she puts her face everywhere. And the fact that her story is so compelling that Lifetime made a movie about her, that's saying
Mm-hmm.
something. And she was all about it. Like, Laura's been posting left and right, which I would too. She wants people to see this. She has a radio show in Cleveland. I think every two, I forget when they air, but she is always sending me links to when it's going to be on to listen. And I've got a couple of them. They're really good. She's such a great person, and I cannot wait until you all get to meet her next week.
Wow. Well, that sucked, but thank you for telling it. I mean, I know the
Yeah.
story needs to be told. And, when you and I decided to do a podcast like last January, we made a pact that we were not going to shy away from cases because they were, air quotes, too much.
Mm-hmm.
But
And it's
that
true. It's important.
that was a lot.
I don't know why people would want to hear a strip. If you're going to listen to murder stories, don't you want to hear the real story and not just some sensitized, cleaned up version of what happened?
The survivor stories hit me harder than the stories where the victim has already been killed, because you and I have discussed this, but you don't get the victim side of the story. You get whatever the killer wants to tell you,
Hmm.
and you get what the police could like hypothesize, but you don't actually know what they felt and what they went through. And like, of course, we still don't know how Laura felt or what she went through, but like, it's so much more real.
Well, yeah, because you rely when you have a victim of a murder, the cops are relying on evidence. Like you can tell she was abused because you see bruises on her wrists or on her this. So
Yeah.
you're literally relying on the body to tell you the story of the victim.
And then I think you're being forced to think about it, and your own mind, like your own
Yeah.
imagination, puts you there.
Well, I'm curious, guys, if you like hearing all the details, like does it help you understand these stories better, or do you prefer sensitized things? Let us know.
Yeah, let us know. You can hit us up on our socials: Facebook, Insta, and TikTok at Murder Unscripted. You can email us at murderunscriptedpod@gmail.com, or you can message us through our website, murderunscriptedpod.com. And if you have any questions for Laura, send them our way and we will try to work them in the interview.
Yep, absolutely.
But with that, now that we've ruined your night and ours, we are out of here. And I'm going to go watch The Office or like Big Bang. And I'm going to snuggle my pups as a palate cleanser because I need that.
Smart move.
Yeah. So this was a heavy episode. So let's just end by saying be safe, be careful, and remember that perverts don't wear signs that say they're perverts.
I have no snarky comeback this week. That guy was a monster. He wasn't even a pervert. That was beyond.
That was way beyond.
See ya.
Bye. Today's episode was really heavy, and if you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, you are not alone. There is help available 24/7. You deserve safety, you deserve love, you deserve respect, and you deserve support. You can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. You can text START, START, to 88788, or you can visit thehotline.org. Your story is not over. There's a way out, and there are so many people who care.